The prairie stretched out like a tired sigh, wide, flat, and dry as old bone. Wind tugged at the dying stalks of grass and whistled through barbed wire like a tune only ghosts remembered. Fence posts leaned at odd angles, sun-bleached and half-swallowed by time. Overhead, the sky burned orange, low and heavy, like it was trying to smother the land in fire before letting night take over. Jack Rowan sat atop his mule-drawn wagon, boots caked with trail dust, shirt damp with sweat and regret. His eyes, shaded by the brim of a sweat-stained hat, scanned the land that was now, by law and ink, his. 100 acres of brittle dirt, busted fences, and a main house that looked like it had given up praying years ago. Bought for $1 damn, he muttered, mostly to the wind. Reckon it's just me and the dust now. There was no one else to hear him, just the wind and the creak of the wagon wheel complaining 'bout the last mile. 5 winters ago, he'd buried his wife with his own 2 hands on the edge of a snowfield that froze her tears before they could hit the earth. Since then, it had just been long days, short meals, and silence thick enough to choke on. He wasn't looking for salvation out here, just something to call his own that didn't bleed, scream, or disappear. The house stood up ahead, tilted slightly east, like it was leaning on God for balance. Its shutters hung crooked. The roof sagged like old shoulders carrying too many winters. But it was his, all of it, for $1 and a signature at the county office from a man named Boone Carter who couldn't look him in the eye. Jack climbed down slow, knees cracking like twigs. He grabbed his pack, slung it over one shoulder, and made for the front steps. But halfway there, he stopped. Something caught his eye in the dirt near the porch. Boot prints, fresh, not his. He crouched, brushed the dirt, still soft, not more than an hour old. He straightened slowly, hand drifting near his belt, not quite on his holster, but close enough. This place wasn't supposed to come with company. The front steps moaned under Jack's boots, like they remembered better days. He pushed the door open slow, and it gave way with a long, tired creak. Dust swirled in the shaft of late-afternoon light spilling through the cracked windows. The air was stale, like it hadn't been breathed in for years. Maybe it hadn't. Then he heard it. A creak upstairs. Not the wind, not the groan of wood settling. Footsteps, soft, measured, like someone was trying not to be heard. Jack went still. Didn't draw yet. Just let his hand rest easy near his side. He took a careful step into the house, the floor whispering beneath him. The staircase curled up into shadow like a snake waiting to strike. Then she stepped into the light, a woman, young but not fresh-faced, barefoot, with a dress torn at the hem and dirt smudged along her arms. Her hair was dark and tangled, fallen in loose waves like it hadn't seen a comb in days, maybe weeks. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Not scared, not angry, just tired, hollow. Like she'd already made peace with whatever was coming. She didn't flinch, didn't scream or run. She just looked at him like she'd been expecting him for a while now. "Didn't figure you'd be early," she said, voice calm as creek water. "But I'm not leaving." Jack's brow furrowed. He hadn't said a word yet. She stood tall, but her fingers were tense, clutching something behind her back. He shifted his stance, slow and steady, eyes never leaving hers. Then he saw it, a flash of iron. Revolver, small, half-cocked. She didn't raise it, didn't threaten, just kept it where it was. A warning, not a promise. Jack didn't move, didn't speak, just took her in. The quiet defiance, the worn edges, the way she looked like she'd been fighting something invisible for a long, long time, and maybe losing. The moment stretched, brittle and sharp like dry timber ready to snap. Jack didn't speak. He just looked at her. This barefoot girl with dust on her skin and a gun behind her back, and did the only thing that made sense. He walked past her. No quick moves, no tension in his shoulders, just calm, quiet steps across the warped floorboards. Eliza tensed, breath caught in her throat. The revolver stayed in her hand, but she didn't lift it. Jack set his pack down near the cold fireplace, dust puffing up in little clouds around his boots. He shrugged off his coat and hung it on the crooked hook by the door, like this was just another stop on a long road, and he'd meant to be here all along. Then he crossed to the pantry. The hinges screamed when he opened it. Inside, 2 cans of beans, half a sack of flour, a rusted tin of coffee. He rummaged without hurry, pulled out a pot and set it on the stove, struck a match. The blue flame flickered to life. She watched, still frozen near the stairs, revolver hanging loose now at her side. He opened a drawer, pulled out 2 mismatched tin plates, 2 spoons, set them both on the table. Still didn't say a damn word. Eliza shifted, her fingers uncurled, the revolver dipping toward the floor. She looked around the room, not at him, but at the chairs, the hearth, the faded photo nailed to the wall of a man with a child on his shoulders. She blinked once. Jack poured water into the pot and stirred in the beans. He didn't glance her way, but he did pull out the second chair. And that was it, a gesture, not an invitation. She set the revolver down gently on the table. The sound was small, but final. Jack finally spoke, voice low and rough. "This house ain't empty no more. Can you guess what's about to happen? Leave your prediction in the comments. Like the video to motivate me to make the next videos." The house didn't creak as much with 2 people in it. Maybe the boards felt steadier beneath more than one soul. Or maybe Jack just noticed it less now, with someone else's quiet footsteps pacing across the floor. They didn't talk. Jack chopped wood each morning, splitting logs with the practiced rhythm of a man who needed something to break. Eliza carried water from the well, careful not to spill, though the path was uneven and the bucket too big for her hands. She never asked him to fetch it. He never offered. When they passed each other, it was with short nods, never smiles. They shared space like 2 deer on opposite banks of the same stream, watchful, alert, and too tired to startle anymore. Jack rebuilt the broken slats on the barn roof. Eliza rewired the chicken coop, though there weren't any chickens left. Some days she weeded the old herb garden near the chapel ruins. Once he caught her singing under her breath while pulling up Wild Thyme. But the second she noticed his presence, the melody died. Evenings settled like ash. Sometimes they'd sit on opposite ends of the porch. Jack would light a pipe. Eliza would nurse a chipped cup of tea. The porch swing groaned under his weight. The wood rail beneath her palms stayed splintered. Out past the fence line, coyotes cried into the dusk. They didn't speak of the prints Jack saw that first day. They didn't speak of anything. But when a cold wind blew in, she closed the window nearest his bedroll before she went to sleep. And when he found her kneeling in the dirt near the barn, holding her side in pain from lifting a cracked beam, he left a strip of clean cloth and a small jar of liniment outside her door. She didn't thank him. He didn't wait for her to. He noticed the silence shifted, though. It was no longer empty. It breathed. There was a morning when he found his shirt folded on the railing, stitched at the shoulder where it had torn. She didn't leave a note, but the thread was the same reddish-brown color as the ribbons she used to tie her hair. That evening, he built a second chair, not for asking her to sit, just for it to be there. They were still strangers, but somehow the house stopped feeling like a place people left. It started feeling like a place someone stayed. Mornings came slow on that patch of land, the kind of slow that made every breath feel like a decision. Jack rose before the sun, same as always. Only difference now, there was another pair of boots by the door, though hers were more worn than walked. She still preferred bare feet on wooden floors, as if needing to feel the house to trust it wouldn't disappear. He left the tin mug by her door that morning, coffee still hot, with a little sugar scraped from the bottom of the jar. Didn't knock, didn't wait, just set it there like it belonged. She opened the door 10 minutes later, took the mug, closed it again, no word. But the next morning, the mug was clean and sitting beside the stove, ready for refill. That was enough. Later that week, Jack came in from the fields, arms scraped from pulling thorn vines off the fence posts. On the kitchen table, his work gloves were laid out, stitched neatly. The right hand seam patched with care, the left cleaned of blood. He turned them over slowly, thumb tracing the fresh thread. No one said anything. The jar of wildflowers showed up a few days later, dandelions, white daisies, and sage, placed beside his tools on the windowsill. He didn't ask where she found them. Spring hadn't quite found this land yet. But the petals were bright, defiant little things, like her. He didn't smile, exactly, but something in him loosened. One night, Jack fell asleep in the chair near the fire, boots still on, arms crossed tight across his chest, like he was guarding a dream. In his lap, a faded photo. His wife, younger than Eliza, holding a baby that hadn't lived long enough for a name. Eliza found him there just past midnight. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. Something about the way his brow twitched, the crease of pain even in sleep, told her this man hadn't rested in years. She walked in slow, pulled the quilt from the end of the couch, draped it over his shoulders. Her hand paused a second on his arm, just enough to feel the warmth of him. Then she stepped back. Next morning, he found the quilt folded on the couch, and the photo tucked back inside the tin box where he kept the things that mattered. He didn't ask how she knew where it belonged. She didn't ask whose face was in the frame. But the next time she sat by the fire, she sat closer. The sun hit hard that day. Dry wind whipped through the fence line, carrying dust and old memories. Jack worked shirtless out near the south pasture, hammering fresh boards into the corral. Sweat traced lines down his back, carving paths through the grit. Every movement was deliberate, measured, not because he was slow, but because pain had taught him the value of pacing. Eliza came to bring him water. She didn't speak, just stood by the gate, watching as he drove another nail home. Her dress clung to her frame in the heat, wind catching at the fabric like it wanted to lift her from the earth altogether. That's when Jack saw it. A scar, pale against her sun-browned skin. It wrapped around her ribs, jagged and deep, the kind that came from something more personal than an accident. He didn't stare, just glanced, then turned back to his work. She didn't flinch, didn't cover it. When he took the cup from her, his hands were rough, splintered. Hers trembled slightly when they touched, just long enough to pass the 10. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It just understood. Later that evening, thunder rolled soft across the hills. Not rain, just sound. A reminder that storms didn't always bring water. They sat by the fire again. Jack stared into the flames, jaw tight. Then, slowly, like a man pulling truth from his ribs, he lifted his shirt. A circular scar sat just below his collarbone, puckered, old, but still angry. "Cheyenne raid," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Back in '63. Thought I was dead till the 3rd day." Eliza didn't react much, just nodded once. "Didn't die," he added with a small shrug. "Guess I wasn't worth taking." She set her cup down slow, reached for the poker, and nudged a log into the embers. After a long minute, she said, "Mine was Maddox. Said he was teaching me a lesson." The fire cracked sharp. Jack didn't say sorry, didn't offer a prayer, just sat there, jaw clenched, eyes steady. Eliza leaned back in her chair, not relaxed, but released somehow. They didn't share any more that night, but something shifted. Later, when they parted for bed, she paused at the stairs. "We all got ghosts," she said quietly. "Ain't the same, but they rattle just as loud." Jack nodded once, and for the first time he watched her walk away, not out of suspicion, but out of recognition. The attic hadn't been touched in years. Dust settled thick as flour across everything. Trunks, cracked mirrors, yellowed curtains eaten at the edges by time and mice. Jack was digging around for spare nails.
Eliza followed, curious, lantern in hand. The light cut a path through the dim, catching in the rafters like sunlight filtered through a church window. She reached for a box tucked behind a beam, old cedar, carved with initials too faded to read. Inside, a leather-bound Bible, corners frayed, spine cracked. It opened easy, like it still remembered being loved. Pressed between the pages was a single dried rose, brittle, sun-bleached, but whole. Eliza stared at it for a long time. Her fingers hovered just above the petals, but didn't touch. Jack leaned against the wall, arms folded. He didn't interrupt. She sat down on the attic floor, the Bible resting open in her lap. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then, softly, barely more than breath, she whispered a prayer. Not polished, not perfect, just, "Lord, I don't know if you're listening, but if you are, I could use a little mercy." Her voice cracked halfway through. Jack didn't move, just watched. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, not embarrassed, just tired of pretending she didn't still hope. He crouched beside her, didn't touch her, didn't offer words, just let the silence stretch between them, solid and safe. Then he said, "Found my wife's Bible once, after she passed. Couldn't open it. Felt like stealing from her peace." Eliza turned to him. Their eyes met. Not sharp, not questioning, just open. "You ever think he's still watching?" she asked, real soft. "Even after all the mess we made?" Jack thought about it. About war, about graves, about the things men do and regret too late. "If he is," he said, voice rough, "maybe he ain't done with us yet." They sat like that a while, shoulder to shoulder, both looking down at that fragile rose pressed between scripture and memory. Later that night, back downstairs, Jack lit the oil lamp. Eliza sat across from him, sorting dried beans into a bowl. Their hands brushed as she passed him a spoon. Neither pulled back. Outside, the wind moaned low through the hills. Inside, something else had settled. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of it. It started with a dust trail. Late afternoon, sky stained copper and ash, the wind pushing hard from the east. Jack was fixing the well crank, brow slick with sweat, when he saw it. Thin at first, like smoke curling over the ridge. He didn't move, just watched. Eliza was hanging laundry, her back turned.
But she knew. You could feel the shift in the air when something wrong crossed the land. She dropped the clothespin before he spoke. "Eliza," Jack said, quiet but certain. She turned. The color drained from her face. "That's Harper," she said. "Wade Harper, Maddox's right hand." Jack looked back at the trail, steady and slow, like a man who wasn't in a hurry because he wasn't afraid. "How far behind?" Jack asked. Eliza shook her head. "He don't follow. He scouts, sends word,
Then the wolves come. They didn't speak again that night, but Jack cleaned every rifle in the house, oiled the hinges, reinforced the back door. He didn't ask if she wanted to run, and she didn't pack. The next morning, they found the rabbit, hung by wire on the gatepost, throat slit, eyes wide open. Jack didn't touch it, just stared for a second, then grabbed a shovel and buried it without a word. Eliza stood by, arms crossed tight over her chest, jaw clenched. She didn't cry. That night, the house felt different, smaller, like the walls were leaning in. Jack stood watch at the window, lantern low. Eliza sat near the fire, hands around a cup that had long gone cold.
"When Maddox sends Harper," she said finally, "he's not asking, he's claiming." Jack didn't turn. "You his property?" Her voice was like sand. "Not anymore." A beat passed. Then he said, "Ain't nobody gonna take what's under my roof without stepping over me first." She didn't thank him. She didn't argue. But later, when he sat on the porch with his rifle resting across his lap, she came out and sat beside him. No words, just presence. Coyotes howled again, but this time it felt like a warning. And somewhere beyond the ridge, Wade Harper was probably already smiling. They came at dawn. No thunder of hooves, no shouting, just the sound of a horse's breath and boots dismounting slow. Harper didn't need noise. His silence did the talking. Jack stood in the doorway, rifle in one hand, other resting easy at his side. Eliza stood just behind him, barefoot on the cool floorboards, her braid tight and low like a soldier preparing for the worst. Harper stepped forward, all black duster and smug grin. His eyes slid over Jack, then past him to her. "Eliza," he said, slow like honey and poison. "Your man's got guts, I'll give him that." Jack didn't flinch. Harper tilted his head.
"I ain't here for him. I'm here to collect what was promised." Eliza stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake. "I was never yours to promise." Harper smiled wider. "You ran. That don't change the contract." Jack raised the rifle half an inch, not aimed, but ready. "Ain't nobody touchin' what's under my roof." Harper's eyes narrowed. For a second, it looked like something might snap. But he just gave a tight nod, then turned, slow, deliberate. "You got till sundown. After that, Maddox don't ask, he takes." Then he was gone. The dust hadn't even settled before Eliza started packing. Jack didn't say a word at first, just watched her stuff things into a canvas sack. But when she reached for the door, he stepped in front of it. "You leave now," he said quietly. "You're running forever." She didn't look up. "I'm not letting you get killed over me." He didn't move. "Ain't just your fight now." For a long second, it was just the two of 'em, still, stubborn, scared. Then she let the bag drop. That night, they went to the old chapel. It stood half-burned on the back edge of the property. Roof caved in, altar scorched by time. But the floorboards were still good, solid, sacred in a way that had nothing to do with pews or preachers. Eliza knelt and pulled back a loose board. Beneath it, the map indeed, her last connection to Maddox's empire. She looked at Jack. "No one knows this is here," she said. "Now it's yours too." He nodded once, didn't reach for it, didn't need to. She buried it again, this time deeper. Then they sat on the chapel steps, side by side, in the ruin of something holy, making something new. No vows, no kisses, just dirt on their hands and the quiet understanding. They weren't alone anymore. The storm hadn't hit yet, but you could feel it coming. Air thick as stew, sky hanging low like it might fall any minute. The trees stood too still. Not a single bird chirped. Even the coyotes had gone quiet. Jack sat on the porch, shotgun across his lap, boots firm on the steps. He'd oiled the hinges, shuttered the windows, double-checked every round. He wasn't waiting. He was ready. Inside, Eliza stood before the mirror, a pair of old shears in one hand. Without flinching, she sliced her braid clean through. The hair hit the floor soft as snowfall. She stared at herself a long time after. Not as a girl anymore, but as someone who had already made peace with whatever came next. When she stepped out onto the porch, Jack didn't look surprised. "Figured you'd do it," he said, eyes still on the trail beyond the hills. She handed him the braid, wrapped in cloth. "If I don't come back, burn it. Don't bury." Jack didn't take it. "You're coming back." No smile, no comfort, just belief. They sat together, eyes on the ridge. The hours crawled. At noon, word came down from Old Man Turner's boy. Sheriff Bennett was riding out. Said he'd be there before sundown. But no one knew which side he'd take. Bennett was law when it suited him. And Maddox? Maddox had ways of making the law sit down and shut up. By mid-afternoon, clouds bunched dark over the west. Lightning cracked along the horizon, still too far to count seconds. Jack went inside and brought out the old cross from the attic. Set it in the dirt by the porch, tied a strip of Eliza's ribbon to it. Not for prayer, not for show, just something to hold on to. A whistle cut through the wind. Low, shrill, familiar. Eliza's back stiffened. Jack stood. Dust curled up again on the ridge, this time broader. 5 riders, slow. Spaced wide, like a hunting line. They weren't charging, they were announcing. "They want us to watch 'em come," Jack muttered. Eliza didn't blink. "Let's not disappoint 'em." And so they waited. No running, no retreat. Just 2 souls on a porch, back straight, storm at their heels, and a world about to break open. The sun hadn't fully climbed the hills yet when they showed up. Dust curled behind 3 riders, Harper in the lead, flanked by 2 gunmen dressed in black, rifle slung low and loose. They didn't rush, didn't need to. Confidence oozed from every lazy hoofbeat. Jack already stood at the fence line, rifle resting against his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched them come like he'd known they would. Maybe not today, but someday. Harper reined in just 10 paces from the gate. His horse snorted, sensing the tension in the man's body. Jack saw it too. Harper wasn't here to parley. He was here to end something. "You got something of mine," Harper called out, voice like gravel in whiskey. "And I come to collect." Jack didn't flinch. "You lost it fair the day she walked away." The 2 gunmen shifted. One tapped the butt of his rifle. The other just stared, dead-eyed. Harper leaned forward, resting one arm lazily on his saddle horn. "Hand her over, or we take her over your corpse." Jack's grip on his rifle didn't tighten. He just said, low and clear, "You boys better be sure of your sins." Behind him, Eliza stood just inside the porch shadow, her breath caught in her throat. She'd heard that voice before, Harper's, too many times in her nightmares. But Jack hadn't wavered, not 1 damn inch. The wind picked up, swirling dust between the 2 men like a drawn line. Harper spat into the dirt. "You got till sunset," he sneered. "After that, this place burns." Then he wheeled his horse and rode off,
the two gunmen trailin' without a word. Only when the dust settled did Eliza whisper, "He's not bluffing." Jack didn't look back at her, just stared at the ridge they vanished over. "No," he said, "he ain't." But neither was he. By sundown, the ranch was quiet again. Too quiet. The wind had died. Even the barn creaked differently, like it was holdin' its breath. Jack stood near the porch, shotgun hangin' from his hand, boots planted in the dirt.
Eliza paced inside, every step short and sharp. Then the sound came, hooves, closer this time. Jack turned, just as Harper stepped through the gate, alone now, pistol already drawn, low and steady. "No more waiting," Harper said. "Time to settle." He raised the gun. Jack didn't move. He didn't even lift his shotgun. "I ain't handin' her over," he said, voice low, almost tired. "You want her, you'll have to kill me." Harper stepped closer, steel glinting in his hand. The gun barrel pointed square at Jack's head. A bead of sweat slid down Jack's temple, but his eyes stayed on Harper's, not afraid, just steady. Behind them, the screen door creaked open. Eliza stepped out, slow, sure, hands empty, braid gone, dress tied up for work, not for running. Harper shifted, surprised. "Didn't figure you'd show your face." She didn't blink. "I'm not hiding anymore." Jack's hand tightened around the stock. "Get back inside," he muttered. "No," she said, "not this time." She stepped down the porch, moving to stand beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "If they kill us," she said, voice clear and still, "let it be here, together." Harper hesitated. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected them. There was something in the way they stood, not defiant, not desperate, just done with fear. "You think I won't do it?" Harper growled. Jack answered without words, just raised his shotgun, cocked it once, slow and clean. "Then go ahead," he said, "but make damn sure it's worth it." For a long second, no one breathed. The sun dipped behind the ridge, casting a blood-orange glow across the land. Harper didn't pull the trigger, not yet. But the air crackled with the promise of fire. The air held its breath. Then, hooves again, from the east this time, fast, steady, and more than one pair. Jack didn't turn, but Harper's eyes flicked over his shoulder. A shadow rose on the ridge, then another, then two more. 4 riders descended down the slope, sunlight flashing off tin stars. Sheriff Bennett rode at the front, dust trailing behind him like a war flag. His hand hovered near his holster, but he didn't draw. His gaze fell straight on Harper. "Stand down, Wade," he said, calm but carved in stone. Harper's jaw twitched. He didn't move the pistol from Jack's head. "This ain't your business, Sheriff." Bennett's voice hardened. "It is when you're threatening citizens on land that ain't yours." Behind him, a deputy raised a rifle just enough to be clear. Jack didn't lower his shotgun. Eliza stayed still, back straight, lips pressed thin, but her eyes flicked to Bennett, then back to Harper. Harper's hand trembled slightly. Not fear, rage. "You think you can stop me?" he snarled. "No," Bennett said, "but the truth can." That did it. Harper snapped the pistol up, toward Jack. 2 shots cracked through the stillness. One from the Reg, one from Jack. Harper staggered, dropped his gun, dropped to his knees, then hit the dirt face first, unmoving. One of his men turned tail and ran, spurring hard over the hill. The other raised both hands, pale and shaking, and dropped his weapon. Silence fell. Even the birds seemed to wait. Jack exhaled, finally. Eliza didn't move until Jack stepped forward and kicked Harper's gun away. Then she turned to Bennett. "It's over?" The sheriff nodded once. For him, maybe not for what he left behind. Behind them, the sun dipped fully below the horizon, casting long shadows over a land that had seen too much blood. But not this time. Not theirs. The dust hadn't even settled before Sheriff Bennett dismounted, slow and heavy like the truth itself was weighing him down. From his saddlebag, he pulled a small folder wrapped in oilskin. Weathered edges, stamped with the county seal. Old Pete came forward, the sheriff said, handing it to Eliza. Said he couldn't keep it in anymore, not after what they did to your father. Eliza took the file with both hands. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't drop it, didn't open it yet either. Her eyes stayed locked on Bennett's. "He saw it?" she asked, her voice barely above the breeze. Bennett nodded. "Saw Harper and Maddox rig that shaft collapse. Saw them ride off while your daddy lay buried." Silence. Then Jack stepped closer. Not touching her, just there, close enough to catch her if she fell. Bennett continued. "That land's yours now, legally. No more dispute. Maddox's claim is void." He handed her another paper, the deed, freshly signed. "You can build here, stay here, or leave it behind, but it's yours again." Eliza looked down at the deed, then over at the barn, then toward the chapel tucked behind the trees. Memories surged, her father's laugh, the hymn her mother used to hum, the sound of the mine whistle before it all caved in. She blinked once, hard. "I thought I'd never get to hear the truth," she whispered, "let alone hold it." Bennett adjusted his hat, eyes softening. Sometimes justice don't come fast, but when it comes, it sticks. He glanced toward the horizon, where Harper's body still lay, untouched. "You got the truth now," he said. "What you do with it, that's between you and the Lord." Then he turned, mounted up, and rode off, his men trailing quiet behind, leaving behind only hoofprints and a truth long overdue. Eliza stood still for a long moment. Then she folded the deed, kissed her thumb, and pressed it to her father's name on the paper. Jack said nothing. He didn't have to. Morning came without sound. No gunshots, no threats, just the creak of wood, the low hum of wind sliding across the hills, and the soft rhythm of two people moving about a home that no longer had ghosts at the gate. Jack sat at the kitchen table, ledger book open, pen in hand. He'd been staring at the page for a long time, long enough for the ink on the nib to dry. He dipped it again. Then, slow and sure, he wrote her name beneath his in the ranch's ownership ledger. Eliza Hart, co-keeper of this land. No ceremony, no permission asked, just truth. Across the yard, Eliza moved through the chapel ruins. The roof had half fallen, pews warped with time and weather, but the altar still stood. She carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth, Jack's late wife's Bible, the one he never touched but never threw away. She placed it gently at the foot of the crossbeam, tied the cloth with a strand of her own hair, then knelt. Not to pray, but to breathe, to let the stillness tell her she could stay. Later, they met again on the porch where everything had begun. No words passed between them for a long while, just the slow scrape of chairs pulled closer together. The sky stretched wide and soft above them. Jack reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a brass key, the old lock to the barn. He handed it to her without a word. She took it, tucked it into her dress. That was it. No kiss, no vow, but they both knew. The fence needed fixing, the roof still leaked, and winter was coming. But for the first time, this land wasn't a battlefield. It was theirs. Not just to survive on, but to live together. How are you feeling witnessing this scene? Like video and let us know your emotions in the comments below. The indictments came down like a late winter storm, quiet, slow-moving, but cold to the bone. The Maddox brothers were named in full: forgery, witness intimidation, destruction of property, and wrongful death. Charges that had waited years to find the light. Sheriff Bennett delivered the news himself, but didn't stay long. He tipped his hat at Eliza and simply said, "It's done now. Let it be done." Inside the cabin, the light was soft through the curtains. Dust hung in golden shafts. Eliza stood by the fireplace, her fingers tracing the cracked leather cover of her father's journal. For years, it had been her compass and burden both. She'd read every word so many times it had long stopped feeling like a story and more like a scar. Now she placed it on the mantel, between the iron candlesticks and the small wooden cross. It didn't feel like surrender. It felt like peace. Meanwhile, Jack moved quietly across the yard, arms full of lumber. He'd found the right boards weeks ago, but hadn't touched them until now. The chapel window had shattered the winter Eliza first left this land. It had never been fixed, just boarded, forgotten, like most things that hurt too deep. But now he sanded the frame smooth, pressed in the new glass pane, and nailed it in with care, not haste, reverence. From the hill, the chapel looked whole again. At dusk, they met where the porch met the wild grass. Jack dusted his hands on his jeans. Eliza didn't speak. She just looked at the chapel, then at the journal behind her in the cabin, then back at Jack, and he nodded, just once. That was all they needed. They didn't mention the Maddox brothers again, or the mine, or the long winter of loss that had once carved silence between every breath they took. Some burdens aren't meant to be carried past the gate. And tonight, for the first time in years, nothing pressed on the air but the hum of crickets and the gentle creak of a house finally at rest. Spring didn't come loud on this part of the prairie. It crept in like a whisper, soft rains, warmer soil, and the first stubborn shoots pushing through frostbitten ground. The cabin smelled of firewood and coffee. 2 mugs sat on the table each morning. No questions asked, no need for words. Jack didn't even glance at the second cup anymore. His hands simply poured, muscle memory shaped by something gentler than routine, presence. Eliza had taken to the garden. She started with small things: lettuce, carrots, green beans. Her hands, once trembling from fear, were steady now. She worked in silence, face shaded by a wide-brimmed hat Jack had left hanging by the door. He never said it was for her, but he always made sure it was clean. Some days Jack would pass her by without saying a thing, just placing a cool canteen by her side. Other days he'd kneel beside her, pull weeds, and not ask why she had tears in her eyes when they uncovered worms and root. Inside, the house changed too. There were 2 sets of boots by the door now, his worn to the sole, hers patched but steady. A second coat on the hook. A third plate in the cupboard, not used yet, but cleaned and waiting. Eliza hung curtains in the front windows, pale blue with tiny white stitching. Jack didn't comment, but he caught himself glancing at them often, especially when the wind moved them just right. He fixed the roof twice, not because it leaked badly, but because it mattered now. One night, Eliza found a pair of boots she hadn't seen before, children's size, half-oiled, sitting next to the hearth. Jack didn't mention them, just kept whittling wood near the fire, hands steady. She didn't ask, just sat beside him, knees brushing. This wasn't the kind of love that burned hot or burst into song. It was the kind that unpacked boxes slowly, hammered nails carefully, and brewed 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. The kind that stayed. Late afternoon sun poured gold across the hills. Jack stood at the edge of the porch, hands on his hips, squinting into the distance. Wind tugged at his collar, warm now, no longer biting. He pointed toward the far field. "That soil's good, black and deep. Reckon we could grow more than just beans." Eliza leaned on the post beside him, arms crossed, brow furrowed with thought. "We'd need a second shed and a water line." Jack smirked. "Sounds like you're planning on staying." She didn't answer, not with words, just nodded slow, like the land had finally let go of its ghosts, and now she could too. A few days later, Jack pulled the tarp off an old project in the barn. Dust rose. Beneath it sat a cradle, unfinished, smooth in places, still raw in others. He'd started it years ago, back when the idea of family was a dream he didn't dare name. Now Eliza ran her fingers along the edges. "You still got the plans?" Jack looked down. No plans, just heart. Together they carried it to the chapel, right under the new window, where light streamed in soft and clear. She laid a single quilt inside, stitched from old shirts and one piece of her father's blanket. No promises, no rush, just space for something new. That night, as coyotes called far off, and the stars blinked like tiny prayers, they sat on the porch, shoulder to shoulder. No need to fill the silence. The land spoke enough. Eliza broke the quiet first. Do you think a place can forgive?" Jack turned to her, voice low. "Don't reckon it's the place that needs to. Maybe it's us." She leaned her head on his shoulder, eyes closed. And in that moment, nothing was missing. Maybe $1 bought the land, but mercy earned them everything else. If you've ever believed that a broken past can still lead to something whole, if you've ever hoped that the quietest kind of love might just be the truest, then this story was meant for you. If you like this video, comment number 1. If you don't, comment number 2. Please subscribe to the channel to watch more videos and give me more motivation to collect and share other stories.